Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to use validation controls in web form applications. So I'm going to create a new project. It'll be an ASP.NET web application, and I'm going to call it Validated Controls Demo and save it on my desktop. It'll be an empty web form application. And I'm going to start off by adding a web form. And I'm going to call it survey page 1. And we're going to bring in a a text box first. A required field validator, and those should be under the validation tab, which kind of makes sense. And a button. So the required field validator, really all it is, if you want to think about it, it's a specialized kind of label, which only displays when the control it's associated with isn't validated. So the first thing we need to do is associate it with a control, and the way we do that is set the control to validate attribute, and we just take the name of the control we want and place it in there. So the control we want to validate is this text box, and then the next attribute we want to set is the text attribute, and I'm just going to put required. Obviously you put whatever message would make sense based on what this text box is, but since we're just dealing with these generically, in fact normally you would change the names to these to something meaningful. And we're going to see if this works. And when we click on the button, it says we get an error. We get web forms. Unobtrusive validation mode requires a script resource mapping for jQuery. And so this would require, if we want to use unobtrusive validation, we would have to install jQuery in this application. If we don't want to do that right away, then we can change some settings in our web config. And probably the easiest way to do that is go into our configuration file and set under add an app settings, and we're going to add a key. And realize your configuration file is basically just a dictionary of key value pairs. And so we're going to set validation settings unobtrusive validation mode and set its value equal to web forms. We'll save that. Go back to our page, and if we rerun it. And probably have a spelling error. Let's see. And actually, the problem is this should not be web forms. If we use web forms, then it will use HTML5 data attributes and late bound JavaScript from a script reference. So that would need jQuery installed. If I put none, it's going to use inline JavaScript to do the validation. So this basically makes your page a little heavier because it's going to bring in the JavaScript in line with the page. So ideally, unobtrusive is better. But if you don't have JavaScript loaded in your project, then it's probably better. Then you would use none. So let's see if that works. And you can see that it shows required. Then if I put some information in here and hit the button, then my validation script goes away. So probably we can make this look a little better by putting some paragraph tags in here. And so before it was kind of all over the place, but if I do it with the tags, this probably looks more like what you're used to with a form. And so often you'll have multiple text boxes, and they'll have validators next to them that will show up and say required. And you could style this this with CSS, for example. You add a CSS class and style all your validators with the same CSS. Alternatively, you can use you could set, for example, your font attributes directly. And we could do that. Let's add a new item. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to add a folder called and then in here I'll add a style sheet. And we'll say dot validator and so we'll set the validator's colors to red, and Let's see what else we want to set. Bold and red, so I'll save that, and then if I go back to my page, I could set the CSS class attribute equal to, what do we name it? To Validator. Let's see if that worked. Oh, looks like it didn't take. Oh, because we didn't put a reference to the page in the head block. And we have to put the reference to the style sheet at the top, of course, so that it knows what we're talking about. Once we do that, it should point to the style sheet. And we can see now our validator is styled. The other nice thing is, of course, that if we need to change that at a later date, we can just change the CSS this here, and it'll change it for the entire site. And you probably want all of your validators to look the same for the entire site. So that's how we can style our required field validator. Realize the required field validator is really just a specialized label that shows up if the control that's being validated does not meet the requirements. And in case of a required field validator, if the text box is empty, it shows this label. We use CSS to style it. And in our web config, we used app settings to set unobtrusive validation mode to none. Another way you can do that is, I'm going to comment this out, and we can, if we go to the global ASAX page, Global ASAX is what runs when your application starts. So when you have a brand new website and you put it on a server, the first time it runs, it executes, it'll run application start. From then on, as long as that application is still running, it doesn't run application start until you stop and restart it. So this is a place you can put initialization code for your application, hence application start. But what we can do is we can put validation settings. Let's see, validation settings dot, can't find it. I'm going to put control dot. It doesn't find it. And it's capital S. But when you put that in, you have to have the using statement, system web UI. Once you have that, then we can set unobtrusive validation mode equal to, and there's a nice enumerator that they provide you, like with all good classes, of course. You should have an enumeration for any magic numbers, essentially, that you might have to have. Otherwise, what you'd have to have is some integer, and someone would have to go look it up. With this enumeration, it just gives me the options, which are none or web forms. I'm going to set it to none. And if this works, what should happen is my survey page should still work. And it still works. So that's another way that we can, rather than put it in the web config, you could also put it in the global ASAX. I'm going to comment this one out and show a third way you can set unobtrusive validation mode. And you could do that directly in the web page load method. I'm going to go to the code behind page for my web page, and in the page load event, it'll be a property of the page, and you can see it right there. Unobtrusive validation mode equals unobtrusive validation mode dot none, and let's see. And the primary differences are here is that if I put it in the pages load method, that's only going to set it for the that one page. If I put it in the web config or in global ASAX, it'll apply it to the whole application. The other thing with web config is you can associate things with folders and directories, and so there's a lot of control where you place things like setting out unobtrusive validation mode to either apply only to a page, to a particular folder in your application, or to the entire application. And so we can see this still works. So those are the different ways of setting unobtrusive validation mode. Another approach that you might do is just to install jQuery. So to install jQuery, so I'm going to undo that, and then I'm going to run it, and we'll see that we get the error again. And we see here we get that error because I just took it out of everything. If I look at this page source from the previous page, we should see some JavaScript, and I believe this script here should be our validation. But it basically adds the script directly, or let's see, this is the script right here. So we see here we have some JavaScript that looks at, where's our input? There's button 1, the text box is text box 1, and here we have the control to validate. And so it's putting the JavaScript basically directly inside the HTML. If I want to do this with JavaScript or with jQuery, then what I would do is go to Tools and open up the NuGet Package Manager. And we can use the Package Manager console, and what you'll do is say install package jQuery. And you can see the nice thing about this package manager is it adds everything for you. You could create the folder yourself. You could go to the jQuery library and bring these things down and put it in yourself. But it's really nice just to have this package management feature now in Visual Studio to do it for you. And we'll need to add another one, which is the ASP.NET script manager.jQuery. And we see now it's working. So by adding those two, adding jQuery and adding that other install for the, where's my package manager? Okay, right there. So adding jQuery and then add package ASP.NET script manager.jQuery, it'll take care of that as well. So any of those approaches can work. The advantages and disadvantages are that if I have jQuery, I have to have the scripts in my project. Usually this is not a problem. These are pretty common libraries, and so they may already be on a client anyway, so there's not a big impact of having them. And if you use, and when you deploy your package, Visual Studio will deploy the minified version, so it shouldn't take up too much memory. Another thing we can do with the required field validator is in this button, we can actually set, or not in the button, but in the text box, one of the attributes we can set is the or I'm sorry, in the required field validator, we can say initial value is equal to, and we can put a message in there for the initial value, and then take that same initial value and set it as the text property for our text box. And what this does is it tells the required field validator that that's not an OK response, that that's just some initial text, so that we're using to provide instructions to the user. And so if I click the button, you notice that it says required because I haven't really put anything new in. If I put something in there, it's good. If I delete everything, well, we have kind of a problem because it's not actually coming up with the required field. And so the way we deal with that is we can add a second required field validator. And this one will get rid of initial value. If I click that, it gives me an error. If I empty it out, I still get required. Notice though that the second one is spaced out. It's even if your required validator is not being displayed, it still takes up space. And then if I put some information, then it's okay. So one of the ways we can deal with that is we can set in our required field validator display equals dynamic. And you probably don't really need it for the second one, but you might as well. And now if we run that, if I have it that way, it says required. If I put some text in, it's gone. If I delete text, it says required. And you notice that now it's dynamically removing the object, or basically making it not take up space when it's not being displayed. So that's probably the preferred way if you have to have multiple validators for one control to set them up. Set display to dynamic. So that completes my demonstration of how to do a basic required field validation on a text box. Thank you very much.